People like listening to other people's stories. Over the years, I've tried to tell people stories. They always lean forward, they get engaged, they want to hear the story.
How would you define wealth?
I would define it in terms of the choices that it enables me to have, not just about buying stuff, spending money. It's the choices about lifestyle, time, family, hobbies, work. And I think about the age of 40, I started to realise that I needed to be a little bit more savvy about it, because it's all very well saving and doing this, but sooner or later you're going to have to be independent. You have to not rely on an employer paying you, a business paying you. You're going to have some money behind you.
What is the story that you would tell people about building wealth? Or when you get a client, what is an example of a story that you would give them?
Well, I think there's stories about your own personal experience, and then because I've worked with clients over the years, I've got a lot of case studies that I can share with people. But I think personal experience is hard to beat, really, because if you've lived it, you tell the story that much more genuinely,
Yes.
And I think it comes across. It's not just an artificial thing. It's the real. It comes from the heart.
Yeah.
That's important. That a story is authentic.
So how would you define wealth, like from your personal point of view?
I think these days I would define it in terms of the choices that it enables me to have.
Yeah.
And that's choices about a lot of things, not just about buying stuff, spending money. It's the choices about lifestyle, time, family, hobbies, work, in the sense that work then becomes optional.
Yes.
Because I think, we go through life, a significant chunk of our life where work is compulsory. And when I say work, I mean exchanging your time for income.
Yep.
Because it's that income that gives you the choice.
Yeah.
But earlier on in our lives, there are so many demands on that income that we don't really have choice. We just got to keep on winding the handle, keep on earning the money. And then gradually, as you go on, wealth becomes more about, okay, now I don't have quite the same compulsion that I had 10 years, 20 years ago. And eventually, you reach this nirvana-like state called financial independence.
Yes.
Where you can choose, And, I've been asked a lot in recent years, are you retired? Do you work? And those words have a sort of, interesting meaning, because what does retirement actually mean? What does financial independence actually mean? And it comes back to that choice thing, Yeah. I can choose what I do. And then, if you can create a situation where you have those choices, then life becomes great, because you focus on doing what you like.
Yeah.
You don't have to put up with all the sort of stuff that you don't like,
No. How much do you feel like you can impact the people that you talk to, the clients that you've dealt with in the past? Like, how much do you feel like you can impact them, and do you know very early if they're going to take on the kind of advice that you give them?
Interesting question. I guess if I didn't believe in the past that I could impact on people's lives, it would have probably been a little demotivating. Because for me, the thing that really gives me a sense of achievement is to feel like I've changed somebody's life for the better. Whether it be through an approach that they take to their life, or decisions that they make, or just simply understanding concepts that they didn't understand before.
Yeah.
But so I have believed for many years that I can deliver that impact. I don't do it. It doesn't work every time.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have a receptive audience. And so, there's an old saying, God helps those who help themselves. But so I'm not God, but I can help people, but they've got to want to be helped.
Yeah.
And if they come to me and are prepared to spend some time and listen to this and apply some principles, then over time you can help. Because a lot of time the help is not immediate, you know. It flows out over a period of years, you know. I mean, many financial decisions have a payback in decades, not in months.
Yeah.
You know, and so how do I know that when I'm talking to somebody today, it's going to work? Well, in simple terms, I don't. But you get a bit of a feel for if people listen, if they make an effort, if they follow through on the things that you've talked to them about. And then over time, you know, there are certain principles, I think, that underpin many financial strategies, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk more about you then and find out about your story.
So have you, thinking back in time, did you ever have like a moment or an event where you were like, okay, yes, I need to start doing things today to help build my wealth so I get that freedom of choice later in life?
Interesting. Yes and no. Sometimes I've sort of wondered whether I've been guilty of not practicing for myself what I preach to others.
Yes.
But of course, you know, if I look back over, you know, many years to when I was in my 20s, you know, I probably was guilty of making all the same mistakes that 20-year-olds make today.
Okay.
And so, you know, my father would probably have said to me, well, you should do this. And I said, what does he know about it, you know? And now I'm in a situation where I'm looking back to, in talking to people like that and saying, well, you know, if you do this, then, you know, things will improve. But they're relying on me and as an older person to sort of convince them that it's actually a good thing to do. I think the things that have helped me have been a consistent view that saving was important.
Yeah.
And I'll go right back to, you know, even before I left home, you know, I was encouraged to save money. And so that was a sort of value that was instilled in me by my parents. And over time, that saving of money, that having some money behind me all the time has just helped me. It's given me a bit of a buffer. It's given me a bit of resilience so that, you know, if I've hit a bit of a rocky patch, I've coped.
Yeah.
And then I think sort of round about the age of 40, I started to realize that I needed to be a little bit more savvy about it, because it's all very well, you know, saving and doing this, but you know, sooner or later you're going to have to be independent. You're going to have to not going to be able to rely on an employer paying you, a business paying you. You know, you're going to have some money behind you to, you know, in your later years. I mean, it's what people call retirement, but let's park that word for now because I don't really like it.
Yeah.
But I think that just the realization that I needed to, you know, what I call fill my bucket, gave me a little bit of a focus, you know, and then so how are you going to do it? And then the question is, well, how much do I need, and so on. But at least just the realization that I needed to focus on it started me off in a more of an investment direction, I guess, than a savings direction.
Okay. And how did, what were some of the steps that you took when you went down that investment track?
Listening to what other people were saying.
Yeah.
I mean, the world is very different today in the sense that, you know, your investment options are much broader and more accessible than they were in those days. But I think just listening to other people and having a bit of a plan and realizing that it was a long game.
Yeah.
You know, that it wasn't going to produce instant results. I think, you know, and so you almost sort of create a plan and then you just get on with it.
Stick to it and focus on it.
And then, you know, it's a slow and steady approach, you know. You know, the old saying, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it really is, you know.
Yeah.
I think to do it successfully, unless you're extremely lucky, it's a long game, you know.
So how did you bring your immediate family along with you on your journey?
I think at that stage, well, initially it was me.
Yeah.
And then it was me and my wife.
Yeah.
And I think right from the time we got together, we talked about money together, and so it became ours. And then, you know, we agreed on strategies together. You know, now she had a different work trajectory to me, but we both knew what we were doing, and so we tried to sort of complement each other strategy-wise.
Yep.
You know, and then when I had children, I have two sons, getting them thinking about money early was something that we felt was important. And, you know, right, going back to, you know, a little piggy bank.
Yes.
It just, and I guess, you know, I talked before about my savings when I was at home, you know. Then I wanted to sort of convey to them the importance of saving. And it was really interesting because one of my sons would save, but as soon as he saw some coins in his jar, he wanted to spend them, whereas the other one didn't.
Yeah.
And they were two, you know, you could say peas in the pod, but they had different, you know,
Personalities, I suppose, coming
money
out.
personalities.
Yeah.
But you know, we tried very hard to sort of convey the importance of, you know, having something behind you that you could fall back on, very much as we had done, you know, and because, you know, when I was growing up, you know, we nobody really knew what credit was.
Wow.
Whereas now, credit is everywhere and easy to get, and can be, you know, can be great, but it can also be a trap.
Yeah. So did your sons listen to your advice?
I think by and large they did. I think it's probably a question that would need to be asked to them. But you know, but I think that, you know, I'd like to think that they have, you know, formed some values that have helped them. I mean, they're both now in their mid-30s, and they're both, you know, reasonably financially secure. Okay. Not independent, but, you know,
working
secure.
towards it.
Working towards it, yeah. So yes, I'd like to think that there was some, you know, flow through of those ideas.
So have you ever had a time throughout your career where you were quite intensely focused on building your wealth, but perhaps other areas of your life may not have gone to plan?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think for me, wealth building has never been the prime thing.
Yeah.
So wealth building has been the consequence of other things that I've been doing. Now I've been, you know, I've had times in my life where I've been really, really busy working and you know, and earning money. But, you know, that's what I mean about the sort of the long game. If you have a plan of attack, that plan can keep going, and you don't have to sort of attend to it every day. You know, I've never been somebody who checks my investment value every day.
Yeah.
I've had clients who have done that, but I've never been like that myself. And I think but knowing that it's all sort of working in the background has been reassuring.
Yes.
So in terms of impact on my other life, I think probably the other way around. I've let my wealth building take care of itself at times.
Yeah.
But whilst I was busy elsewhere, and, you know, I've had the business, I've had family, you know, I've had, you know, personal commitments, and you know, I've always sort of tried to focus on the things that, you know, going on there, and the money side of things. If you can set it, I say set it and forget it. You shouldn't forget it, but you can set it.
Yes.
You know, and having relatively simple systems to just keep an eye on what's happening.
Yeah.
Is useful. You know.
So would you say that you focus more on your personal life as a priority rather than kind of having a specific number in mind of wealth and trying to kind of go after that at all costs? And that's what's allowed you to, I guess, have more of a balanced work-life kind of situation?
I'd like to think so, because I think that, you know, I've known people who've been absolutely obsessed with wealth, absolutely obsessed with numbers, and I think it can be quite sort of limiting. So to me, it's been a secondary thing, not a first priority. But you know, I'm just sort of reflecting on the past, because, you know, you go through different phases in your life, you know, and You know, I mean, there have been times where I've spent additional time just sort of getting my financial affairs in order, so that then I don't have to sort of worry about them every day.
Yes.
You know,
Coming up with a plan.
absolutely,
Figuring out implementation.
Absolutely, and so I think, you know, one of the things that I think is really, really important is this having a plan. You know, people talk about financial planning. They talk, you know, and you know, get a plan together. If you've got a plan, and then the plan gets implemented and is reasonably self-sustaining, then it frees you up to do other things. And I think that's what has probably been the real, you know, trick for me, is that it's allowed me to have that balance by not being obsessed by
an end goal, or a specific number.
Yeah.
How broad did you collaborate across your network and family in terms of talking about wealth and implementing or building kind of asset bases with, you know, how broad did that go for you and your family and your network? Like, was it just your immediate family and you took care of, you know, your wife, your kids, and the immediate family, and the discussions as well? I think that's also interesting. Like, how far did the discussions go? Like, how broad, you know, would you and your network be about their wealth?
Yeah. Well, from a professional point of view, I think my observation is that finance is probably the thing that people talk about least to a network. You know, if we talk about, you know, a coffee group, or, you know, Friday afternoon drinks or something like that, you know, people will talk about all sorts of things, but generally people won't talk about their personal financial stuff. So I think it's very private, but I you know, I've talked to professionals, you know, about my stuff in the past, and then of course a lot of people, you know, have talked to me about their stuff. I think within families, it's important that families do talk about this stuff, and I would say it should be not just, you know, with your partner or, you know, husband, wife. It should be intergenerational.
Yeah.
So, you know, over my life, I think what I've observed is that my parents were not very open about their finances when I was younger. I've taken the view that I want to be more open with my children about our financial situation, because in many ways it's the family situation. Yeah, sure, it's me and my wife, but, you know, it goes beyond that.
They're heavily impacted by it, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want my children to have an insight into what my financial situation is, not particularly because I want their advice, although my sons would be very happy, I'm sure, to say, oh, you should do this, that, you know, but just because it's part of their planning, you know. And I think, you know, as I said before, my wife and I have always talked openly about our finances, but I've seen lots of situations where, you know, partners have not talked.
Yeah.
And a lot of problems come from families that don't talk about money.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that, just general life experience, I think. Having those conversations up front, being really open about it, so important.
And I think, you know, just following on from that, one of the real values of a financial professional is that sometimes that, you know, the right professional can actually facilitate that discussion within a family.
Right.
So, you know, it's not about that professional telling people what to do. It's just saying, look, very much as we're doing here, let's just sit and talk, and you ask some questions and you get people talking. You know, I've had situations in the past where, you know, husband and wife have been sitting in the same room. I've been asking them questions. One of them has responded. The other one said, "You never ever told me that before." Yeah. You know, and it's so important that you get on the same page, because it, you know, like I said before, it should really be our plan.
Yeah.
Not my plan and your plan.
Yeah. Or my plan and you're coming along for the ride.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, you know, that's a useful, and I think it's often not appreciated as a valuable contribution, but I would say in some ways it's probably one of the more important contributions that a good professional can make, is
Right.
to facilitate a discussion within a family. You know?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You mentioned briefly, and I'll just quickly fix your mic.
Maybe clip it on the shirt. Yeah, can you speak?
Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, better.
Okay, mic fix. You mentioned talking about investing or wealth with your sons. Do they look at the world and investing differently from you, and how do you? Is it do you think it's appropriate? Because obviously time goes on, things change, right? You mentioned that people didn't really have a great understanding of credit when you were growing up, or you were going through a part of your career, a major part of your career perhaps. Whereas now money for a very long time has been what I would call easy. Money is easy, and what we mean by that is the ability to borrow has been made very easy, which means that then you have to think differently about assets and about money, because it has a drastic effect. And then I guess, how do you feel that environment has, I guess, shaped your son's view on investing in wealth versus yours, if at all?
I think it's increased the range of options that they have
To invest.
to consider. I think in some situations we will almost reach a stage now where there's so many options that people get confused, and confusion can lead to procrastination, and procrastination can lead to delay in getting started on a plan, which then, given, as we said, it's a long game. If the later you leave it to get started, the more impact it's going to have on the end result. So I think somehow we need to find a way for people to cut through the noise and think, what are the real issues here, And really, at the end of the day, it probably matters less what you do than the fact that you just do something.
Start. Actually start.
Start,
Yeah.
yes. And so I think KiwiSaver's been a good thing in that respect, although there's certain features of it, the scheme, that I'm not particularly fond of, but it's just got people into a sort of mindset of putting money aside. I think just coming back to your question, Charlie, I think I've formed the view over my life that whilst debt is, credit, debt, whatever you like to call it, it is much more available, but it needs to be managed carefully, and of course the money lenders are very happy to lend lots of money, and their businesses thrive on the fact that the more money they lend, the more money they make, which is, in my view, directly in opposition to what's best for the individual. So you have a bit of a conflict, you have the money sellers who want to sell more money.
Well, it's society, right? It has an impact on society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because how you navigate, how you engineer the system of borrowing could obviously disenfranchise a certain demographic based on lending criteria as well. So, you may be in a situation where you go, this individual is too risky, so we're only going to give them the bad credit, and the ability to lend in specific ways that are not cost effective, but also can only be used on certain things, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously others may get the ability to borrow in a more advantageous way for them, even though ultimately, like you say, the seller of money is the one they're just trying to capture a premium on what they lend and make profit. But I think that, like you say, as credit has become more available, one, there are more products, but two, the ability for certain demographics to take advantage of that credit has obviously been very advantageous.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I won't want to make any value judgments on different lenders and different products, lending products, and so on. But I think that there's a lot of poor financial decision making happens off the back of clever marketing by the money sellers, and they're marketing to a demographic who, in some cases, are pretty desperate, and it's a sort of, the fix today is you get what you want today, but then you pay for it.
Yeah, long term and a lot more.
And it slows you down in terms of making progress towards wealth, because borrowing money is not wealth, it's somebody else's wealth, not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're basically selling future time, actually, right? Because when you think about, I kind of think about investing as almost like productivity, actually. And I can either allocate capital, I can allocate time, or now in the modern age, more so you can allocate computation, right, which is computers. So you can automate things, you can build systems. Think about the railway, right? That's kind of an early example of productivity and allocating time to get a better outcome. And I guess when you're borrowing, often you're borrowing from your future cash flow. So you're actually you're kind of giving up time in a sense when you're borrowing something.
Well, you're effectively saying I'm going to spend some of my time in the future to pay back what I've had today. And so if we call it the yesterday component of your cash flow, because you're effectively working to pay off decisions that were made yesterday, which then slows you down from doing the tomorrow piece, which is putting money aside for tomorrow. This is the interesting here, because I think not enough emphasis here is there's not enough emphasis in the financial press about the huge benefits that early repayment of mortgage debt can bring about.
Yes, we had a discussion on this.
Yes,
I agree.
And if we go back to the money sellers wanting to sell more money, and the more they sell you, and the longer they sell it to you for, the more money they make.
Yeah.
Their interests are at odds with what's best for the individual. And so I think, when we talk about investment, I have a conversation with people that, if you have a mortgage on the property that you live in, the very best investment that you can make is in your own mortgage. Because you're achieving a number of benefits by doing that. Firstly, you are de-risking your life by reducing your debt. Secondly, you're getting a very good return on the extra money that you're putting into your mortgage. Quite easily can be a double-digit return, which is predictable. Now, there aren't too many double-digit returns that are predictable in this life.
Yes, very few.
And you're also then positioning yourself, for this time when you're going to have more choice in the future, because you've built a strong base, And I think, there's a lot of mortgage debt out there at the moment that will be with people until they're past working.
What I'm seeing at the moment in the real estate market too is, houses that I was looking at, say, in 2020, 2021, they're back on the market and they're going to sell for less than what those poor people paid for them. And so they're walking away with this mortgage on nothing.
Yes.
It's quite terrifying.
Well, I actually think the biggest kind of, the scariest part around, just, I guess, unfortunate timing, which you can't really predict, although if you were a student of history, you may have seen 2021 especially being a bit of an outlier, I guess you could say. But it's a great example near where I live, where it was actually, in my opinion, the renovation after the purchase that really ruined, that investment for them, because it was a good market, and then there was probably a pool put in that wasn't necessarily needed. And then if you want to sell after that, you then have the mental barrier of not wanting to incur a loss.
Yes.
So, I'd say that the car purchases as well, and maybe holidays on your mortgage, it's a depreciating asset. Now, I can understand in certain circumstances, if you have a lot of conviction, and you want to start a business and you've got lots of equity in your house, you may make that decision whether or not it's obviously going to work out would be dependent on the outcome of the business. However, it's at least in theory, it's not a depreciating asset, although businesses are obviously uncertain, especially when you're going from 0 to 1, when you're starting something new. Would you say that the best way to make wealth is through property, investments, or your own business?
Well,
Or let's say from an absolute return basis. Because obviously what's best for each individual is dependent on how they want to construct their life.
Yeah. And I mean, some people have the skills to run a business, some people don't. Some people have the skills with property, some people don't. I think it's a cliche to say it depends, but it's true, because there isn't a one answer for every situation. I mean, I think that, the principles that I would sort of apply there is, what is your ability to take on risk? Because you take on risk when you borrow money, you take on risk when you set up a business. If you do both of those things, you take on
double risk,
more risk. And what is your time frame? Are you trying to make a quick buck, or is this a long-term thing? Now, we're talking about property prices. If you bought a property in Auckland in 2021 and you wanted to sell it in 2024, you may take a hit. But if you bought a property in 2021 that you were planning to keep for 20 years, probably doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if you had taken on so much risk that you were forced to sell, and that's what's happened to a lot of people, interest rates have gone up, prices have come down, we're squeezed, then that risk is playing out and affecting your future, and some of these people, it's going to affect their life forever.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really a really good point, and it's about kind of being able to be as resilient as possible and set yourself up to basically, you have a kind of an idea of what the future looks like. It's probably going to be a very wiggly line along the kind of way that you want it to go, especially if you have a plan, but it's going to look differently from moment to moment.
I think going back to the point that I made before about my own experience, just that sort of savings mentality, that savings approach gave me the resilience to cope with the wiggles in the line.
Yep.
That's right.
And that, is experience that I have lived, and, I would be and that's what I have hoped that I've been able to convey, to my children. But when you're living on the edge all the time, that's when risk really can find you out, because you only get, you get tipped off the edge, and the bank says, or the lender says, we want our money back, and you can't,
Yeah, it's kind of it's that thing that, like, the old market kind of, I guess, adage that, oh, well, buy when everyone's fearful, and sell when everyone's like happy, right? Buy when there's blood on the streets is the kind of statement that everyone says, especially with equity investing, which obviously is a great interest of mine. But unfortunately, I think, and why I've spent a lot of time learning about what money means and credit, is because unfortunately, when there's blood on the streets, typically the market has this force function to make it impossible for you to buy when blood is on the streets. That's the real difficult part, because it's very easy to say, oh, when everyone's fearful, just buy. And then when everyone's super euphoric, just sell. But unfortunately, credit is loosest when everyone's super happy, and it's tightest when everyone's super fearful. So that you've got the kind of mental side of, oh yeah, if I see that there's an opportunity and I have resilience and I have a stockpile of capital that I can allocate, then it's simple. I'll just buy when everyone's super scared. But unfortunately, the market has this kind of way of making it so people are liquid at the most inconvenient times. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that philosophy is most easily applied by people who've already got wealth. Because they've got the resources to buy, now when things, as you say, are at their blackest, and the economy's tight and jobs are going, and so it's all very well to say to somebody, you should be buying, But they say, well, hang on, I've got to buy the groceries, I've got to pay
with
my
what?
rent, I can't afford to do that because I've got these bills here that I need to pay. And so it's not always possible to enact that. Now, to some extent, KiwiSaver, the KiwiSaver sort of regular savings approach does that to an extent through, the old
Dollar cost
fashioned
averaging.
dollar cost averaging approach. But it only does it a little bit. You don't make a killing. You just do okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of KiwiSavers are ultimately passive funds that are kind of going after very similar return profiles, depending on whether you're choosing a balanced growth or conservative fund. So they're all going after kind of the same North Star, the same benchmark. You're not going to have this idiosyncratic decision made where KiwiSaver would ever go away from that dollar cost averaging approach.
There are some KiwiSavers now where you can actually pick and choose what you
Self-directed, yes.
invest in. But the principle of KiwiSaver is it's the same amount of money each pay period going in. And so, whether you buy a balanced fund and a passive balanced fund or you handpick stocks, at least you're putting money in on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's that putting money in on a regular basis, not over 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, but over 20 years, 30 years, that makes the difference, just doing it.
So is that the advice that you would give someone starting out today? They're like, okay, I want to build my wealth. I'm going to start saving or investing a little bit now and consistently into the future.
Pretty much, and take a long-term view.
Yep.
Almost sort of look at it as something that you're not going to look at for 20, 30, 40 years. Now, I talked earlier on about one of my concerns about KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver was provided the capability for people to take out money as a deposit on a first home.
Yeah.
Now, I think that was a political decision. I think it was a sweetener, but it does change the dynamics of it because, if somebody at age 20 is going into KiwiSaver, in all probability, they're going to take some money out before they go long.
Yeah.
So their first tranche is a short-term savings program, and then they're going to go long, but they miss out. If those first 10 years had been long-term, when they get to the end, it's going to be that much
Different,
significantly
less,
better.
yeah. I get what you
But
mean.
they want a house,
Yeah.
and the house is a good thing to have.
Yep.
Especially if you don't have a mortgage.
Yes, totally.
Especially good when you don't have a mortgage. Do you think that people should be able to, or what would your views be on people taking out their KiwiSaver to start a business?
Well, you can't do that.
No, I know. The concept of.
Well, you're going to like this answer, Charlie. I think it depends. My favourite answer. But no, I think in general I would probably not be in favour of that. I think that because the more different functions you try and put on KiwiSaver, the more compromises you have to make. If KiwiSaver were out and out a retirement program for people 65 plus, which is what it is at the moment, the withdrawal age, it would make the planning easier, I think. We're seeing quite a lot of hardship withdrawals at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are not business investments. That's people who are just struggling to pay their bills. But as soon as you compromise the objectives, you compromise the results.
Well, I guess it's what is the objective? I guess it's the objective that people are more financially free, no? Or is it a safety net? Would you view it as a safety net or a
KiwiSaver? I think ultimately the government has this long-term view that KiwiSaver is going to take the place of New Zealand superannuation. So at the moment, New Zealand superannuation is paid to all New Zealanders post age 65, irrespective of their financial situation, providing that they qualify through residence.
Yep.
But we hear an awful lot of, discussion about whether that is sustainable long term. And I think that KiwiSaver, in a generation's time will almost become the New Zealand superannuation of today, and then anybody who doesn't, so then the old age pension for New Zealanders will only be paid to people who don't have their own money.
KiwiSaver.
So it'll be more of a benefit, whereas at the moment it's an entitlement, and it's a very good entitlement. I have to say, I think it's, when we do the sums with clients, it makes a significant contribution to their financial choices in those later years.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that KiwiSaver was introduced in 2007, so it's been around now 17 years, but it needs to be around for another 20 years before you can make this generational shift, I think, and governments are probably, reluctant to sort of signal this because they'll lose votes.
Yeah, it'll be my age group and maybe a little bit older that are impacted by it.
I didn't want to say that, but that would be my advice.
Yeah.
Don't assume that their government will be there to give you a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the approach that everyone should take.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that you should be skeptical of any assistance at all. And that's why it's important to have a plan and try and be as self-sufficient as possible, because then you aren't reliant on something completely out of your control.
That's right. I think it's control what you can. Your plan should be made around things you can control. Now you can't control markets, you can't control the weather, you can't control the government, but there are strategies that you can take which can sort of work through all of those things, and it doesn't really matter who's in government, it doesn't really matter what the economy's doing, it doesn't really matter, what the weather is. Your plan's going to work because your basic principles are sound,
Yes.
Spend less than you earn.
Well, there's some quite famous quotes, I think, on that one. But I think that's right. I mean, if you can squeeze out something out of your earnings to put aside for tomorrow, then it's going to ultimately, put you in a better space.
Yeah, for sure.
How much? Well, it depends, but
It always depends.
And that's an interesting thing, because we often get asked, well, how much do I need to have?
It's how long is a piece of string, right? Like, it's all very...
Depends, but there are ways of putting some numbers around this, but those numbers need to be taken, not guaranteed numbers. They're just sort of indicators, I think. And one of the problems with a lot of the planning software these days is that they produce precise numbers, which everybody then thinks is, gosh, that's the number, that's my number. Now, it's only a guide because the future is uncertain. But if you have no guide at all, then you're wandering around, aimlessly, really.
Yeah, no forecast is correct.
No.
But at least it gives you an opportunity to think about what it could be.
It gives you an order of magnitude, a feeling of the right amount, or a comfortable amount.
I think, what you want is a forecast that is thought about, where you've thought critically about what could happen.
Yep.
And try to actually keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And not what you want to happen.
Yeah.
We should all take a leaf out of central banks' books and do the opposite, where their forecasts magically go to where they want them.
You're sounding a little bit cynical there.
From time to time.
I think what I have sort of said to clients, over the years is that from about age 40 onwards, it's useful to have an idea of what the goal looks like roughly. You don't have to drill down to the last dollar, but it's useful to know the quantum, Prior to age 40, there's probably so much other stuff going on in your life that you really, and the the later years are so far away that you think, well, I'll just, push those out for now and focus on what's important to me today, But I think 40 is, and I think, looking back, you asked me before about my journey. I mean, I think 40 was a sort of year where you start to sort of think, now I need to get a little bit more serious about this, So if you've been serious and built a position before age 40, great.
It's a bonus.
But if you haven't done that and then you get to 40, then you really need to do it.
And would you say it should be would you put more, where would you put more emphasis on income? Like, so, should your number be my net worth is X, or conversely, could it be I receive X every month?
If you do it from income, you finish up, you limit your outcome. So, if somebody's earning $80,000 a year, for example, they have, we can figure out what their spending is, and so we can determine what's left over, and then we can project that forward, and we can say, well, that will give you this result in 20 years' time. But if somebody says, well, this is what I want in 20 years' time, then we work back and say, well, in order to get that in 20 years' time, this is what you've got to earn today. Now, I've had this discussion with people a lot over the years when they've been made redundant.
Yeah.
And people are sort of being forced to reprogram, and they have an opportunity to reset, but they don't always know what that reset should look like. So if you actually go to the far end and say, what do they need, and then work it back, it can give you a better indication of what you need to be targeting in your next job. If we're talking to people who are in a reasonably stable long-term career, then it's unreasonable to say, well, you need to earn twice as much, because they will say, well, look, I can't, So then that's what I mean by the outcome is limited by what you're earning today. And so in that case, we project forward and say, well, that's where you're going to get to, and that's what you're going to have, and so then that's what you're going to have to live by. I think, for a lot of people, these numbers can be quite scary.
Yeah, it's the reality, right? Like, there's this lovely vision of retirement or whatever it looks like, and then, the expectation that there's going to be super when we get there, and then when you actually work backwards and you think, okay, this is what I want to be able to spend on a monthly basis or have access to at least. You work it backwards and you're like, oh my gosh,
yes.
I need a side hustle, or I need to start a company or find other ways to generate.
And so that, that's a good point, because what then happens is that people get pressured into taking more risky decisions to try and get more.
Get to the baseline they think they need to be at.
And that may be okay, or it may actually mean that they make less, I mean, the classic, decision-making emotions for investment, fear and greed. And if you try and if you create a situation where people feel like I need to be more greedy, that can, create some problems. But that, of course, is the basis on which a lot of, investment scams.
Well, it's about get rich quick, right? Well, we all know really getting rich is slow. You want to get rich slow scheme.
Get rich slow is a good motto, yeah.
And that's just about, don't blow up. And getting rich slow is a way to have a plan without getting.
Well, I heard a variation on that many years ago, which was winning by not losing. And when you see people who lose in the investment world, you realise that if you lose badly, many people don't ever recover. So the first way you win is by making sure you don't lose.
And I think you see that within the professional realm of investing, is bad losses can kind of psychologically make it untenable for that professional to continue because of that reason. Yeah. And you obviously don't want that as an individual as well. So it's that balance of, and that's the benefit again of starting early, because actually in your early years you can take quote unquote more risk because you have more time. And as you get older, you have less time, which means time is probably the most fascinating thing in life.
So you can, take more risk when you're absolutely right, because the logical analysis here is that when you're young and you've got a long time frame, you can take more risk, and because you've got sort of time for things to work through. Problem is that if you don't understand investment principles, and I've seen people in their 20s, with their KiwiSaver invested in cash because they didn't understand, and they were scared, and so they thought, oh, we'll leave it in cash because we know that's safe. Now, over 30, 40 years, that's an appalling strategy.
Well, it's actually, it gets into the realm of actually risk itself. And I think risk is a very misunderstood topic because of that example that you just gave, right? Risk is actually really complex, and actually you can make a really risky move and make a lot of money. And you can, in theory, make something that's perceived as not taking much risk and have a poor outcome.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone should also be reassured that very smart investment professionals have lost a lot of money, because actually it's not just about that. You can make a rational, good financial decision and just have an outcome that is not what you desire. So I think, in a sense, you've also got to be, I guess, happy or content with the fact that you can make a good decision but not have a great outcome.
Yes.
And I think that allows you to stay in the game longer.
And there's ways in which you can mitigate that risk. You can't ever remove it, but you can mitigate risk in investment by just following some, reasonably standard principles. Everybody, diversification is the classic, isn't it? Don't have all your eggs in one basket.
Well, we've talked about that a lot on the podcast. But I conversely would go, well, and it's Stanley Druckenmiller, who's probably my favourite investor of all time. He says, well, you can put all your eggs in one basket, but you better be watching it very carefully. But that's the entrepreneur in me, I guess. But I'd say that both work. It's just, it's knowing. You should also know if all of your eggs are in one basket as well, right? Knowing is key. It's knowing that you have enough. You're on track to have enough.
Well, there's the wrong sort of diversification. I mean, I can remember situations back in the global financial crisis days when people thought they'd diversified by putting their money with 3 different finance companies, and they all went belly up. So that was not good diversification, but they thought they were doing the right thing, but they didn't understand
the correlated nature of 3 financial companies may face the same strains in certain environments. That's why a lot of people and I mean, in terms of an absolute return, it's not done that well, but the Ray Dalio all-weather portfolio is always something that I've looked at as just being an interesting portfolio, because like you say, it's named all-weather, which means that, well, in theory, and again, it does become a bit of a theory thing, because we don't know when the next strange event that kind of makes it, makes the knowns now different, right? And the principle of diversification across uncorrelated assets is quite nice, and I think it's also interesting to think how the geographic nature of your investments plays a huge role, especially in New Zealand, where the market is quite soft, or I guess not so liquid and very small in local public markets, but then obviously you end up with lots of investments in other jurisdictions. And how does that play into your portfolio? How does that influence the outcome because of foreign exchange? It can become quite...
it can get very, very complicated. And one of, coming back to something we were talking about earlier, I mean, one of the things here is how much of this technical stuff are you actually going to follow yourself? And how much are you basically going to contract out to somebody else and say, look, I've got a family here, I've got a business to run, I want to go and play golf, I don't want to spend all my time thinking about all this stuff, so I'm going to contract out that technical stuff to people who know what they're doing so that I can have a life. And so, that's the sort of managed investment portfolio approach. But
and that can be, there's 1,000 ways to do it now.
Yes,
now that it's
that's
accessible.
Right. That's right.
Like what Warren Buffett said. I can't remember he was saying to a questioner at an AGM. What should I do? It's like invest in the S&P 500 and go back to work. And it's a nicer outcome because it's what everyone else is getting as well. You know, market returns are market returns. When you feel great, everyone probably feels great. And when you don't feel great, probably everyone else doesn't feel too great either.
That's right.
And I think that's Howard Marks said, you know, he had a memo called I Beg to Differ, which he basically said, if you want better than market outcomes, you better be willing to be different. And by I beg to differ, it means that you might be different in the wrong way.
Yes.
Not just beating the market, but also underperforming. And that's, I guess, that's why the ETFs and indexes are such a great approach.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the interesting things that's happened at the moment is that professional financial advice is becoming increasingly what I would call vanilla, because there are certain principles that people, you know, good practice suggests you should follow: diversification, asset allocation, you know, and so for a financial advisor to be different is actually now quite a risky position to take, because the regulations will put those people under the spotlight if something goes wrong. So rather than sort of running the risk of something going wrong, financial advisors are increasingly taking the view, well, we can't afford to be too different here, because if we are challenged, we've got to justify why we were being different. And so it's the safest position. The position that our insurers like is that we're not different.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes the same for investment managers as well, right? Sticking to the benchmarks and not wanting to be different.
So then, you know, if you are going to be different, you've almost got to go it alone.
Yeah.
So if you want to be different, that's fine, but don't come to me for advice.
Yeah. That's right.
You know, which then raises the interesting question, well, what is actually the role of the financial advisor? Because, you know, over many years, financial advisors have positioned themselves to be able to get you a good return on your money. But if everybody's getting the same return, then, you know,
Do we
in one
still
sense,
need you?
all financial advisors are the same. So what distinguishes financial advisors? You know, what makes this person more effective in their job than that person when they're getting the same results?
Yeah, I guess we'll find out as time goes on. Maybe.
Well, maybe it's something to do with the way in which they care, and they sort of they care for their clients.
Yes.
You know, all the stuff I talked about before.
More
you
the
know, soft skills,
Yeah.
the facilitation of the discussions, the support, the encouragement, not the numbers themselves, but all the wraparound stuff. You know, and I think increasing that's good, because, you know, computers and robots can
do all the vanilla stuff. I mean, that's it. But I guess it's the nuanced, personalized. We were talking about it the other day. You know, what does it mean to me?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to me if I as a client want to be different? And how do I navigate that how would one navigate that as an advisor is also going to be an interesting evolution, I guess, because people aren't staying in the same careers or, you know, for an extended period of time. So, you know, and I guess the path is less trodden now. And as obviously technology has evolved and this society has evolved and credit has evolved, and everything seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger, it means that things almost move faster.
I think one of the other things that this then throws up is that what are people paying for when they get advice? Yeah. You know, and traditionally the financial advice world has been very product dominated, where the products in one way or another have provided the remuneration for the advisors. And I wonder whether we aren't moving towards a period now where financial advisors are going to have to be smarter than that, because if people can go and buy the product themselves
for free, basically free. I mean, if you look at an ETF or an index fund,
nothing is free, but low cost, shall we say?
The cost to transact is very low.
Yeah. So, you know, if they can go and get the product themselves, then maybe the financial advisors need to be thinking, well, I've got to show the client that I can do something else.
What can I add?
Now, if I can get husband and wife on the same page about their financial decision making, that's got to be valuable. It's got to be a valuable service, and I've got to find a way to be able to charge them for that. But we're in a situation, I don't think we've got there yet. I don't think there's a lot of financial advisors who don't have those skills. And like you say, they're soft skills. They're not sort of technical product skills.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, especially how the independent advisor goes about life. I think, especially as there's a lot of consolidation, really due to the fact that actually, I guess the consumer not really understanding what the difference is, and that also plays into part that very few pay directly. They pay from product.
In one way or another,
So I think it's going to be fascinating. I think that we'll get closer to what that looks like over the next 5 to 10 years, and I think the change will move much faster, especially as technology comes in and the ability for, I guess, the ability to find out what it means to me becomes less manual. It's been great having you on. It's been an awesome conversation. I'm glad we covered all the topics we did.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas.
No, it was really good. It's good to have someone with your experience on too, right? So it's, I think giving people the opportunity to actually, hear people who have gone through it and what their advice is or how it might have changed over time. Like you say, it's all about stories, right? I think that's really important to be able to pass that information on.